A new era is upon us. Tangent Proptech unites founders, real estate and VC investors, urban leaders, and passionate creators who are improving our communities and cities. Join venture capitalists Jeffrey Berman and Zach Aarons and Proptech entrepreneur Edward Cohen, that's me, to learn about housing innovation, the future of work, and climate tech. We examine these themes through interviews and conversations with Proptech CEOs, real estate owners and operators, and venture investors, and how we can leverage tech and collaboration to help solve the housing crisis, figure out the future of work, and how to decarbonize the built environment. If you would like to get your company's or organization's mission featured on Tangent, email us at tangentcommunity@gmail.com. Hi, I'm Edward Cohen. Welcome to Tangent. As usual, I'm joined by Proptech venture capital investor, New York real estate icon, and Novak Djokovic's whisperer, Zach Aarons.
Thanks so much for having me, Edward. I've actually never met Novak, but I did get Yannick Sinner's autograph on my son's giant tennis ball once.
That's amazing. Your son must be very proud.
He was thrilled.
Today on Tangent, we have Mark Zurada, COO of PinPoint Analytics, AI-powered bid estimating software for public construction works. Hi, Mark. Where does this podcast find you?
Doing great. Happy to be on and share what we're doing at PinPoint.
AI has arrived to public works. Mark, you've worked in AI, data, and construction technology. So what led you to co-found PinPoint Analytics?
So, we started late 2020 and I was advising the company. I was still working at a different company and helping them kind of figure out exactly how to approach data and AI in the space. And we raised some money mid last year, and that's when I came on working full time as COO. And we just saw a huge opportunity to apply AI and data in this space. So, we came in from the data and AI space rather than the construction space. And it was just greenfield in terms of what we could do. So, nobody's really doing this. And we have a lot of friends in the construction space. We kind of pitched the idea. It all resonated, so we kind of went into it. And, honestly, Jim and I have been startup guys for probably 20 years. And this is probably the company that we've been just the most excited about. We just have so much data. We know everything about everyone who's in this space, right? So we can just connect and analyze and layer AI on top of this data and just really change the game.
So talk about the broken system of public works bidding. Local governments award projects typically to the lowest bidder. So there's an incentive for contractors and engineers to bid low just to win. But pricing mistakes can lead to huge risks. And, in cases, the projects never get built or the projects get built 3 times. So talk about how broken is the public works bidding process currently.
Right. So, yeah, you kind of nailed it on the head. It is the lowest price bidder that wins here. So there's just a lot of risk for the GCs that are playing in this game, right? So they do have, the incentive to go as low as possible. So that, what they say in this game is it's easy to win. It's really hard to win and maximize profits. So, the sweet spot is really winning by a penny. Like that's the ultimate win. That's what everybody's chasing after. And that's really what we're tuning our AI for. So, the price that we're delivering to them is, analyzing historical bids and trying to come up with that price that's essentially a penny below the winner. We're trying to eliminate that risk, maximize their profits. And, today, most of the people that are in this space have been doing it for 30 years. They're using their gut. They're using their intuition. There's nothing data-driven about this approach, right? So, they might have, some spreadsheets with their costs. They add some margin to it, but, there's no Home Depot catalog with these prices in it. So it's kind of like if you've ever remodeled your kitchen, you get 5 GCs to give you a quote. It's no different in the public workspace. You'll get prices from $5,000 to $50,000 to do the same job. So the prices are all over the place, which just clearly indicates that there are some inefficiencies in the way that people approach these estimations. And that's really where, data and AI can just provide so much lift. Yeah, for the GCs, obviously that's one of our core customer segments, but, municipalities too, they have a lot of risk as well. So, the process there is, they generally work with an engineering company who estimates the job. They add some cushion to that, but it's really a cost-based estimate. It doesn't look at what the market's actually going to do. So if the engineer gets it wrong, it leads to a project going to rebid. It costs taxpayer dollars to do that. It wastes time. The potholes remain in the street. Nothing's getting done. nobody looks good in those types of situations. So, being able to estimate what the market's going to do is really from the angle of GCs, municipalities, and engineers.
Fascinating. So you're talking about helping general contractors, bid smarter, win more, and stop leaving money on the table. And on the municipality side, governments can budget with precision, with data, and cut out the waste to, help ensure that taxpayer dollars are put to good use.
Right. So kind of what they do is, at the beginning of a project, they'll say it's $1 million roadway project, right? They'll have to secure that amount of budget for, until the project gets awarded or paid out. So if they over budget, for example, put aside $2 million on a $1 million project, they've locked up that $1 million of budget and they can't really utilize it for the benefit of the community during that time. So now, there's all sorts of reasons why getting that price right at the beginning is important. And they have, 3-year horizons to some of the projects that they're doing. So how do you price a project years into the future? There's so many variables there. So using AI, and prediction and forecasting is actually really important to what they do as well.
Zach, in your experience and from your seat, how much guesswork is involved in construction estimating today?
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount of guesswork. You have to put in a bid often before you hear the actual pricing from your subcontractors. The subcontractors have to do pricing before they even get the accurate bid on the materials they're going to have to buy. I don't know if anyone's heard it, but there might be tariffs looming on the horizon. And so we're living in a world today where the price of raw materials, whether it's concrete, steel, gypsum, could be fluctuating dramatically based on the day-to-day whims of certain capricious individuals in the government. And when you're dealing in a climate like that, a political and operating climate like that, it becomes even more challenging to accurately price out jobs. That's on the material side. And then on the labor side, we're still dealing with a tremendous skilled labor shortage here in the United States. Really, in most industrialized nations in the world, they're experiencing skilled labor shortages. So the price of labor can fluctuate dramatically from municipality to municipality, state to state, and also month to month. It's very much driven by supply and demand. Not only do these contractors not have insight into how much the labor might cost, they don't necessarily have insight into how to predict that because they don't necessarily know what other jobs are going on at the time in their particular region because they don't have high fidelity data about that either. So when you combine the tremendous uncertainty around construction materials, tremendous uncertainty around labor costs, it's more challenging than ever, arguably, despite this explosion of data, it's more challenging than ever to accurately price a job.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, that's one of the ways that we're really changing the game here is, right? So we have real time, essentially fire hose data coming into our system about SLED agency public works projects. So SLED is basically everything below state level. So local government, you can think about it like that. So our data really incorporates all of that information that Zach was saying, because we're looking at the ultimate prices, the fully loaded prices on those bid tallies, which have labor wages baked into it, which have supply chain baked into it, which have, competitive pressures baked into it. So all of our numbers essentially have all those components built into it. So, when we're getting that real-time data, it really reflects what the market's doing at this moment.
Frustrating, but also fascinating opportunities. There seems to also be a mismatch between the short term and the long term. It's so dynamic today. Not only what tariffs may be in place are changing almost on a daily basis, and what materials are available and how much labor costs, but we need to estimate that these projects usually take months, if not years, and in some cases decades. So how do you match the difference in the short term versus what you need to really plan for a long-term project to be successful? It's truly a wild timeline that we are in.
And there's really no crystal ball. Nobody can predict the future, but right now, nobody's even data driven. So what we're doing is just next level.
I mean, there can be some parallels drawn to Zillow's estimate with what you're doing, but for public projects. So talk about, how machine learning models are transforming the bids, how bids are made and how bids are won.
Yeah, actually, that's an analogy that I've used in when I talk about PinPoint myself. So Zillow's an awesome company. We love them. A lot of their the Z estimate's essentially built upon public data as well. Like, right, they're just extracting, property deeds, looking at the value, the transaction prices, the mortgage values, on those properties, and looking at comps. We're kind of doing the same thing for public works here. So our pinpoint estimates are essentially really direct analogs of the Z estimate. In much of the same way, I don't think anybody buys a house today without looking at Z estimate. Nobody would, buy a car without going to Edmunds or Kelly Blue Book, and just getting that benchmark about what the market's actually pricing this asset as. So it's the same thing here. You can use our number. It's really decision support, estimating support. Nobody goes in with the actual Z estimate. If you really want the house, you'll go 10% higher. If you think that you don't really want to, go 10% lower. So it's the same thing with a construction project. Sometimes you're super busy. You don't need to be that aggressive with your pricing, but at least you have that benchmark. At least you're not spending a month on it preparing a bid package when you're, just to be 200% over, which we see. I mean, we've seen 300 and 400% over. So people are using us in the same way as Zillow. The other kind of interesting corollary there, maybe not with Z estimate so much, but with Zillow, is that we kind of triangulate the market just like Zillow does. So like Zillow serves buyers, it serves sellers, it serves agents. So in much the same way that we're kind of building a customer base with GCs, municipalities, and engineers, we're helping them all in the same way, but for slightly different reasons with that same number.
Fascinating. Talk more about, digitizing the public data. There are 80,000 local governments releasing bid tallies. So talk about how PinPoint Analytics aggregates and makes sense of this data, and also to help contractors that manipulate pricing. So how do you help municipalities, prevent them from getting scammed?
Good question. So, I mean, that's a huge part of our IP is how we go about doing that. It took, I think greater part of 3 years just to understand and build that. The problem in the SLED level is that there's absolutely no standardization. Like if you go to the federal level, they have, codes for materials, everything is properly described. Even at the state level, like Department of Transportation, things are much more standardized, much more accessible online. So you can get bid tallies for those types of jobs easy. And it's, you can normalize and standardize that data any which way. And I'm sure there's a lot of companies that do that and layer AI on top of it. But, you can't really solve the problem that we're solving without being able to get those bid tallies in the first place at scale and digitize them in an efficient way. So, there's hundreds of thousands of these bid tallies that we're going after, approximately looking at, 5 years of data is what we're attempting to collect across every municipality in the country. So it's been a real challenge. It's kind of a fun one, at least for us. And, that was the first thing we have to solve. The data and analytics is actually the easier part of the job.
What's the hard part of the job?
Getting all of these bid tallies into a standardized form is the real challenge. And let alone those problems that I described, every single bid tally that we get looks different. Yeah, it might look like a table, might look something like, an Excel, but it's totally not standardized. It's all over the place. Columns can be rows, rows can be columns. Everything is drawn completely differently. They can be Xeroxes from, Xerox quality from 5 years ago. There is not a single thing that's consistent in dealing with this space.
Support for this episode comes from Market Stadium. How should you choose the next real estate market to invest in? Should you keep investing in the same metro area? Will Las Vegas, Buffalo, and Charlotte live up to the hype? These are some of the fundamental questions multifamily and single-family investors are thinking about. That's where Market Stadium comes in. Market Stadium is your one-stop real estate data platform that optimizes every process of multifamily and single-family market analysis. Market Stadium helps accelerate 4 essential steps in the real estate investment process, including macro market selection, initial market screening, deep dive location analysis, and investment presentation. Their platform also helps real estate investors understand how markets have performed until now and how markets will grow in the future. Market Stadium also provides climate scores for every market to analyze climate risk from floods, earthquakes, wildfires, and more, so you can de-risk your investments. To learn more and supercharge your multifamily or single-family investment market analysis, book a demo at marketstadium.com. That's marketstadium.com. Zach, from a tech startup scalability point of view, I mean, the more data Pinpoint Analytics ingest, the better they'll get at predicting how much and how long something will take. But at the same time, we're talking about a highly localized process in many cases. So talk about the opportunities, but also the challenges in scaling something that relies on, local governments and state governments, but you're trying to also standardize everything.
It's a great question. It's a double-edged sword. I think the challenges associated with what PinPoint is trying to do lie in the fact that no two municipalities hold and organize their data in the exact same way. And so because we do not have standardization and there are thousands and thousands of municipalities that matter across the United States, that presents a challenge with scalability. I think some of the mitigants for that are the new capabilities of some of these LLMs. I think we're seeing, especially with the latest Claude and ChatGPT releases, these bots able to reach into complex data sets and ingest and clean data. And if you can develop your own software, your own algorithms, your own natural language processing that can interact with these LLMs, you can create a real technical and product-based moat, and then things will snowball from there. So you can approach new municipalities much easier. You gain the trust of contractors who do business in multiple municipalities, and the time to digitize reduces with every new municipal data set that you ingest. So while I find it challenging, I think there's also an opportunity to build a real moat here for PinPoint Analytics. And full disclosure, I'm an investor, so I'm hoping that's true as well. But we also frequently evaluate a lot of platforms where the data is already standardized across, maybe it's national data, or maybe it's data that has to be exactly the same across every municipality or county or state. And that doesn't create a moat that is particularly wide or particularly deep, because anybody who's skilled at operating an LLM and has a nice user interface can go in, ingest that data, and repackage it and spit it back out in maybe a more elegant format. And there's not necessarily the opportunity to create real technology that performs the challenging part of the equation.
Fascinating. I mean, getting all municipalities to speak the same language, you're basically teaching them Esperanto.
The most widely used man-made language, right?
That's right. You've analyzed thousands of construction bids. Can you share some of the egregious examples of public bidding in real estate, or processes that were just done horribly wrong across the board? I'm not sure if Amazon HQ2 comes into play, or that was more political backlash than anything. But yeah, any projects or any bid processes that you can highlight.
I probably alluded to some of this, but like we analyze a lot of our customers' jobs, and we see a lot of these bid tallies just on a daily basis. So the worst case scenarios are when you just see somebody that's, who won the project who's 50% lower than everybody else. That happens more often than you think, and they're obligated to deliver at that price. And that's really where the risk comes in. So if they get the price wrong, they still have to complete the project, and then one project can sink a company, right? So and we see that. So going back to the, winning is easy. It's just hard to win with margin. So that's kind of the sad part of the business. And that's what, we're trying to help those people. A lot of times you'll have new players come into the public workspace. It's really hard for them. Like, not only is there all this governmental red tape just to, figure out where to get RFPs, how to get registered, how to do bonding, and how to do all these different things. All that can be hard for them. And then they put in all this time to do an estimate. And either they're like 50% lower, or they're 500% higher. It's just all over the place. So for those new entrants into the market, with a steep learning curve, it's really hard to win, right? So most people just throw their arms up and give up after a couple. So there's a ton of tallies of companies that, dabbled in it, but quickly got out of it. They couldn't wrap their heads around it, right? So it's really those that we just see where you just have those inefficiencies in pricing. The nice win stories are, when we see a tally with highly competitive tally, meaning more bidders than an average project. And, we see that a lot in this season because it's just bidding season. During the summer, they're out there in the field. Right now, it's just bidding season. So every once in a while, we see these, highly contested projects, and we'll have like 3 or 4 customers on them. And, when our customers win and that price is, essentially within 5% of our price, if not tighter, we love those types of stories, right? Because it just shows that we're helping people and helping them win.
Is there a correlation if there like a specific project has more bids, then it tends to be better priced or better predicted, or it doesn't really make a difference how many bidders it has?
On our side, no, it doesn't make a difference because we're essentially agnostic of that. We don't know it until after the fact, right? So in terms of, it's more seasonal when we see competition go up, right? Because people are you have freeze thaw issues. So what GCs are essentially doing is just bidding on projects left and right. So you'll just see more aggressive pricing in the winter, more bidders.
Any specific projects that I think are more ripe for PinPoint analytics? Like, is it road expansion? Is it infrastructure, bridges, public housing? Like any particular ones that are better?
Yeah. So we tend to focus on roads, bridges, utilities. That's kind of our sweet spot right now. So horizontal construction. So we don't currently look at the project specifications. And so for vertical construction or, let's say hospitals and things like that are complex to build, you really have to have a deeper understanding of what's in the specification. So, I think that's, to Zach's point, the LLMs would give us a leg up into getting into that space. But, there's probably a lot of lump sum work in that space as well. So in the space that we excel at, in the space that data and AI can currently excel at, having that line item breakdown is really where we can excel. So yeah, those are the categories of projects that we do.
Talk about how different markets, urban versus rural or East Coast versus Midwest react to AI-powered construction analytics. Anyone that is better suited for it?
Well, I would say that we have focused on New Jersey, a lot of more of the urban markets. The rural markets often just don't have that many projects going on or that many bidders for that matter, right? So there's plenty of municipalities that might do a single project every year, and they might only have one bidder. A lot of times you won't even get any bidders on a project. So by and large, I think the markets that we're going to do really well at are the more competitive ones. But that's not to say that we don't have customers in more rural areas and townships. We serve townships in rural areas as well. But yeah, I think urban is the name of the game here, and there's a lot of variation in which cities you're working in. So we're picking up on those patterns too. So, some counties or cities for that matter have antiquated utilities, for example, and everybody that's in that market knows that it's extremely difficult to work in that area. And so the prices are just naturally higher for that city. And you wouldn't know that if you didn't have that know-how and expertise. So our AI is picking up on that. But for people that are bidding, again, that's just another level of risk. So if you're trying to grow into different markets, expand your company, and all of a sudden you're bidding on a roadway project in an urban area, well, you might not know the hidden problems of that area. So you'll see these geographical based price variations through our analytics that can surface that up. So you might not know exactly why it's higher, but we do know that it is higher. So it can help companies expand their footprint in a more confident way.
Zach, talk about AI's role in making tax dollars more efficient and hence an advantage for public workers, politicians that adopt the first mover adoption here in getting them reelected if they can be reelected. But how could AI reshape how municipalities allocate budgets and reduce public spending waste?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of different ways. I think a lot of tasks right now that are done within the government, document collection, collation, data ingestion, to the extent it happens, scheduling tasks, a lot of those can be performed better by artificial intelligence. I think a huge part of government jobs relate to people fielding calls from constituents. Most of the time, I don't know about you, when I call my congressman, I'm not necessarily happy about something. I think most of these people are not calling up and giving people attaboys and attagirls. They're calling when they have a complaint about something. I don't like how you voted on something. I don't like your policy with respect to gun control or whatever it is. One of the beauties of interacting with an AI bot is they don't get upset when you berate them on the phone. They don't take it personally. They are able to have a calm conversation with you and route you appropriately and provide you the information you need. So I think sort of intelligent call center capability is a huge area of government where AI bots can play a huge role and not necessarily replace the job of staffers, but put staffers on more important work drafting actual policy rather than fielding calls from angry psychos like me who might be annoyed about what a politician did and are effectively just placating their constituents or trying to interact with them, explaining to them a certain policy. As long as it's not too complex and at the base level, an LLM should be able to handle that work and also have a mechanism where if it's too complex, it gets kicked up to a human. But, try calling the congressman's office or the congresswoman's office, you either don't get through or you get on the line with someone who's highly educated and should probably be doing something else to benefit our country or our city other than talking to you about your current gripe.
I think the question is, will getting a phone call answered by a robot make people more angry or less angry? But I guess we'll find out.
They don't have to know it's a robot. These technologies are getting so good. We're not quite there yet. But if you fast forward 2 years, it's going to be very hard to know who's a robot and who's not when they're on the phone with you. I mean, that's a scary thought, for many of our listeners, but it's an inconvenient truth. And honestly, a lot of these robots might know the policy or the voting record better than a human who would have to look it up. And if there's a bedside manner type conversation that's needed, then yes, you get the Homo sapien involved for that. But a lot of this sort of call center work are people asking very basic questions or people making very angry complaints or requests for information where they don't necessarily need to be speaking to a human.
Fascinating world.
This episode is brought to you in collaboration with Blueprint, the future of real estate. A few weeks ago, in September, Jeff and I participated in the largest, most global gathering of industry leaders and innovators leading the charge in changing the built environment, from construction to transaction, for 3 days of networking, learning, and ecosystem advancement in Las Vegas. With trillions of dollars of assets and the best global innovators under one roof, the future of the built world happens at Blueprint. Blueprint 2025 will take place at the Venetian Las Vegas from September 16th to 18th. Learn more and join the interest list at blueprintvegas.com. That's blueprintvegas.com. See y'all there.
Mark, last but not least, collaboration superpower. If you could choose one person, historic or living, to do a partnership with, who would it be?
I don't have a very good answer for that.
I have a good one, as you might imagine. I've been spending all week researching my latest collaboration superpower. And, I've talked about the history of banking, international banking, when I mentioned Giovanni de' Medici, who was the founder of the Medici banking dynasty. I'm going to go today, since we're living in a new age of information and data transparency with PinPoint analytics. I'm going to say that I would collaborate with Nathan Meyer Rothschild.
Mm-hmm.
Nathan Rothschild, founder of NM Rothschild and Sons, which was a bank. He's originally from Frankfurt, Germany, but this was a bank started that he was sent by his father, Meyer Rothschild, to London so that they could set up a banking dynasty in multiple nodes in Europe. He set up shop in London. And what was amazingly innovative about Rothschild, and this is relatively well known, is that he was a junkie for information. And he wanted to know information about how the economy was doing all over Europe before anybody else knew it. And so how did he acquire most of his innovation? He had the most complex network of carrier pigeons in the world. And it's actually apocryphal that he heard about Napoleon's defeat at the Battle of Waterloo because of carrier pigeons. It was most likely another way. But he got information about the economy faster than his banking competitors because he had this carrier pigeon network and they were sending, and it was also secure and encrypted, right? PinPoint, we talk about security, encryption a lot, right? There's nothing more secure unless you shoot it down. But they would code their messages that they would attach to these carrier pigeons. So they had this whole network of carrier pigeons. Because of that, they grew the largest banking dynasty in Europe, which still exists in a slightly different form to this day. Also, from an impact perspective, one of the things that Rothschild did was he was instrumental in abolishing slavery in the UK and the colonies. When the British government wanted to abolish slavery, there was a lot of protest, as you might imagine, from wealthy landowners, plantation owners, slave owners in the colonies. Rothschild went ahead and cut a deal with them saying he would float these bonds to effectively compensate them. And that's what effectively got the deal done, brought all the government together to abolish slavery. Obviously, it was not a perfect solution as these people were cashing in for a couple hundred years, but for the time, it was a solution that worked to do the right thing, which was to abolish the horrible institution of slavery. And that was done about 30 years before it happened in the United States.
That's a fantastic answer, Zach. The depth of that answer is really great. I always struggle with this question. I would probably say, and this is probably a little bit of a odd answer, but I would say Chopin. So I'm an avid classical pianist. Yeah, Chopin. Thank you.
Yeah.
Avid classical pianist, and to me, technology is really an outlet for creativity. And building something like PinPoint is highly technical, just like Chopin's pieces. You get something beautiful out of it. And if you get it right, and if you stitch it all together, you have something that's amazing. And I think PinPoint's an amazing company, and it's poetry.
I love it, Mark. You've redeemed yourself from a non-answer to one of the best answers we've ever heard on this program. And the hundreds of millions of people listening to this will hopefully, if they haven't listened to Chopin before, they will download it on Spotify. And if they are fans, they will very much appreciate the connection between bits and bytes and beautiful classical pieces.
Also, that happens to be my 89-year-old grandma who still performs surgery favorite composer. So I hope Chopin's estate doesn't sue us for ending this episode with one of Chopin's virtuoso pianist pieces. Anyway, Mark, where can Tangent listeners, GCs, municipalities, and engineers learn more about PinPoint Analytics and connect with you?
Yeah, sure. We're at pinpointanalytics.ai. So take a look there. Feel free to reach out to me at mark@pinpointanalytics.ai.
Mark Zurada, COO of PinPoint Analytics, AI-powered bid estimating software for public works. Thank you so much for coming to Tangent today and sharing your company, your vision, and your exciting work with us.
Thank you so much.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review Tangent, and share the show with a friend. This episode is produced by me, Edward Cohen. Thanks for listening to Tangent Proptech, and remember, collaboration is our superpower. So stay curious and always be learning.